and Ifunanya watched from the shadows, their faces tight with jealousy. "This girl will not live to see that wedding day," Adigo hissed, her fingers digging into the folds of her wrapper. "Mama, we can't just let her get away with this." Ifunya spat, her lips curled in anger. "I should be the one marrying the prince. She humiliated us. Everyone is laughing at us." Adio's eyes darkened. "We will give her something she will never recover from." In a quiet Igbo village, surrounded by golden fields and towering palm trees, Obiageli lived a simple but peaceful life. She was known for her gentle nature and kind heart, always helping elders and children alike. Her father, Okonkwo, was a respected palm wine tapper, climbing the tallest palm trees to harvest sweet wine for the villagers. One fateful day, tragedy struck. While tapping a tree, Okonkwo fell from a great height. His legs broke, and despite the village healer's efforts, the wounds never fully healed. Over time, his health declined, and he eventually passed away, leaving Obiageli and her mother, Neka, to struggle alone. Desperate for stability, Neko remarried Ezeoka, a wealthy trader who already had a wife, Adogo, and a daughter, Ifunanya. The marriage was meant to bring security, but instead it brought misery. Adogo and Ifunanya resented Obiageli's presence, treating her like a mere servant. Obiageli never retaliated. She continued to live humbly, weaving baskets and fetching water, content with the little happiness she could find. But Ifunanya's jealousy simmered like an unspoken curse, waiting for the right moment to strike. One day, excitement spread like wildfire through the village. Prince Chizoba, the heir to the great kingdom of Nuri, was coming to choose a bride. The young women in the village adorned themselves with their finest beads, braided their hair beautifully, and practiced graceful smiles. However, when the prince arrived, he was not alone. By his side was his best friend, Ebuka, a young man dressed in simple servant robes. Unbeknownst to the villagers, they had switched places. Ebuka, wearing the royal garments, pretended to be the prince, while the real prince, Chizoba, took on the role of a mere servant. The true prince had been sent away as a child for his safety, and no one in the village had ever seen him grown. While the village maidens flocked around Ebuka, showering him with praise and admiration, they completely ignored Chizoba, treating him like a lowly errand boy. Some even mistreated him, sending him on pointless tasks, laughing at his supposed unworthiness. But Obiageli was different. Unlike the others, she showed kindness to both the prince and the servant. She would sit with the real prince, offering him water, asking if he had eaten, and talking to him without pride or pretense. She even helped the palace servants, treating them with the same respect as the village elders. Ebuka, playing the role of the prince, took note of how the maidens behaved. Some flattered him endlessly, while others ignored his servant friend completely. But Obiageli's humble and genuine nature stood out from them all. On the final day of the visit, Ebuka, still disguised as the prince, stood before the elders. "I have made my choice," he declared. Gasps filled the air as the maidens waited eagerly. Then, to everyone's shock, he stepped aside and gestured to Chizoba, the so-called servant. "But first, let me introduce the real prince. This is Prince Chizoba, the heir to the throne." A stunned silence fell upon the crowd. Chizoba, standing tall in his simple servant robes, smiled warmly at Obiageli. "I have seen the hearts of many," he said, "but only one has shown true kindness without expecting anything in return. I choose Obiageli as my bride." The village erupted in disbelief and celebration. The maidens who had ignored or insulted him now bowed in shame. Ifunanya, who had been desperate to win the prince's attention, stood frozen in humiliation. Adako and Ifunanya had schemed and plotted, but fate had already chosen the rightful bride. The prince promised to return in 3 moons for the wedding, and Obiageli's life forever changed. No longer was she the scorned stepdaughter. She was the chosen one, a bride of destiny. The day after Prince Chizoba's shocking revelation, Obiageli and her mother, Neka, rejoiced. God has shown me mercy, Neka cried, hugging her daughter tightly. The village women, though some secretly envious, came to congratulate them, bringing palm wine and freshly pounded yam. Obiageli's kind heart had earned her the love of many, and they all danced in celebration. But not everyone rejoiced. Ado and Ifunanya watched from the shadows, their faces tight with jealousy. "This girl will not live to see that wedding day," Adago hissed, her fingers digging into the folds of her wrapper. "Mama, we can't just let her get away with this." Ifunya spat, her lips curled in anger. "I should be the one marrying the prince. She humiliated us. Everyone is laughing at us." Adio's eyes darkened. "We will give her something she will never recover from." 2 days later, Adago and Ifunanya arrived at Obiageli's doorstep, carrying a steaming bowl of jollof rice with smoked fish and thick palm oil sauce, her favorite meal. "Ini, we have come in peace," Adago said sweetly, her eyes betraying no malice. "This is a congratulatory meal. We may have had our differences, but you are still our daughter. Let us celebrate together." Obiageli, too kind to suspect treachery, smiled brightly. "Dalu, thank you, stepmother. This means a lot to me." She sat with them and ate, her heart light with joy. The taste was rich, delicious, comforting. Neka, though hesitant, felt relief. "Maybe Adago and Ifunyanya have accepted my daughter's fate," she thought. But that night, everything changed. It started with a light itch on her hands, a slight discomfort she ignored. By the next morning, the itch had spread to her arms, and by evening, angry red boils had erupted all over her body. "Mama, my skin is burning," Obiageli sobbed, scratching until her fingers bled. Neka, horrified, tried everything: cold water, herbs, palm oil. But nothing worked. Within days, her once beautiful skin was covered in swollen, painful boils. The villagers whispered behind their hands as she passed. "Could it be a curse?" one woman murmured. "Maybe she angered the gods," another said. Even the children ran from her, calling her names. The humiliation was unbearable. Neka ran to the village healer, Dibia Okena, pleading for a cure. The old man examined Obiageli, his face grave. "This is not an ordinary sickness," he said, shaking his head. "It is poison, slow and deadly. Someone wants your daughter gone." Neka's heart shattered. "Who would do this?" she whispered. But before the healer could begin his work, a new horror struck. One afternoon, as Obiageli struggled to fetch water, her body suddenly stiffened. Her hands jerked violently. Her legs twisted beneath her. And then she fell. Her body convulsed on the ground, dust rising around her. Screams filled the air. Women rushed forward, but no one dared to touch her. "Possessed," a villager shouted. "This girl is cursed." The seizures became frequent. She fell into fire, burning her hands. She collapsed on the road, scraping her knees until blood ran. One night she was found unconscious in her own room, her lips foaming. The whispers turned to outright rejection. Neka sat beside her ailing daughter, her eyes swollen with exhaustion. Obiageli's once smooth, glowing skin was now covered in painful, red boils. She had barely eaten in days, and every breath she took seemed to drain what little strength she had left. And in the depths of her suffering, the cruelest betrayal awaited. Adago watched her silently from the doorway, a calculated expression on her face. Then, with a deep sigh, she stepped forward. "Neka," she began softly, her voice laced with false concern. "You know I love you like a sister, and I have been thinking, maybe the gods are trying to tell us something." Neka looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" Adago lowered her voice. "Look at Obiageli. Look at her condition. Do you truly believe the prince will still want her like this? Neka's face twisted in pain, but she remained silent. Adago continued, what if she collapses before the prince? What if her illness brings shame to his household? Do you think the royal family will forgive such a disgrace? Neka clutched her wrapper, her heart pounding. What are you suggesting? She asked weakly. Adahu placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Listen to me, sister. We must think of the family's honor. Since Obiageli is unwell, let Ifunyanya take her place. Neka's eyes widened in shock. You want Ifunyanya to marry the prince instead? Adoga sighed deeply, shaking her head. What choice do we have? She said with feigned sadness. If we tell the prince that Obiageli is sick, he will reject her. But if we tell the village that she ran away, no one will question it. Ifunyanya is the next best choice. Neka felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. Betray her own daughter? The same child who had been her only source of joy since Okonkwo died? But as she looked at Obiageli's fragile body, doubt crept in. Could she really risk Obiageli being rejected and humiliated by the prince? Adago pressed on, sensing Neka's hesitation. You know I am right, Neka. Do this for your daughter. Let her rest. Let Ifunyanya carry this burden instead. Neka closed her eyes, torn between loyalty and fear. And in her moment of weakness, she nodded. That night, while Obiageli lay in a fevered sleep, Adogo and Ifunyanya carried out their plan. With the help of 2 servants loyal to Adogo, they lifted Obiageli's frail body and carried her to a small dark chamber beneath the hut. The room was cold, airless, and hidden beneath a wooden trapdoor covered by a mat. As they laid her down on a thin, tattered cloth, Ifunyanya sneered. The great Obiageli, she whispered mockingly. Let's see how much kindness will save you now. Adago locked the heavy wooden door and placed a large stone over the trapdoor. By morning, Obiageli was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Adago and Ifunyanya wasted no time. They ran into the village square, wailing loudly, drawing attention from all corners. Obiageli has disgraced us all, Adago cried, tears streaming down her face. She ran away with a lover in the night. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Though it was true, someone muttered, she was not pure after all. How could she do this to the prince? Another whispered. Even Neka, hearing the lie, collapsed in shock. Her body shook violently, but her voice failed her. She wanted to scream the truth, to fight for her daughter, but Adago's words haunted her. If we tell the prince she is sick, he will reject her. The guilt clawed at Neka's heart, but the shame held her tongue. When the news reached Prince Chizoba, his face darkened. He had trusted Obiageli. He had chosen her because she was different from the others, because she had shown kindness when no one else had. And yet, she had abandoned him? He clenched his jaw. She betrayed me? He muttered, his chest tightening. His best friend, Ebuka, placed a hand on his shoulder. Do not let your heart be troubled, my prince. Maybe she was never meant to be yours. Chizoba's eyes burned with anger. He had fought against deceit his whole life. He would not let a woman play him for a fool. The wedding must continue, the elders declared. We cannot let the prince leave empty-handed. Ifunyanya is the next best choice. And just like that, Ifunyanya stepped forward, smiling as if she had not orchestrated the entire thing. Her heart soared with victory. She would marry a prince. She would wear the crown that should have been Obiageli's, and no one would ever know the truth. Adauga had been silently watching Obiageli's every move, and in the depths of her mind, a new plan began to take shape. One that would ensure her victory and silence the only threat that lingered. She knew Ifunyanya would soon take her place as the prince's bride, but there was a part of her that still feared the worst. What if Obiageli returned one day, What if, after everything, she somehow reclaimed her place and exposed Adago for the treacherous woman she was? The thought sent chills down her spine. Audio could not risk that. She had to end it once and for all before Obiageli became a problem. Adago's plan was as simple as it was deadly. With Obiageli still lying weak and frail, Adago saw her chance to finish what they started. She would terminate Obiageli without Nneka's knowledge and then blame the entire thing on the grieving mother. No one would believe that Nneka, devastated by her daughter's departure, would be capable of such an act. It would all be swept under the rug, and Adago could go on living her life without fear of a return. But even as the plan swirled in her mind, there was a nagging doubt. What if Nneka figured it out? What if Obiageli's death wasn't as easy to cover up as she hoped? While Adago schemed in the shadows, Ifunanya prepared for the biggest moment of her life, the wedding. Her heart swelled with excitement and anticipation as she donned the finest attire and anticipated the life she would soon lead as the prince's bride. But as the days grew shorter, the weight of her actions began to settle heavily on her. She had won, yes, but at what cost? Ifunanya, now on the verge of her greatest triumph, began to wonder whether she could truly live with the consequences of everything that had happened. She was about to marry the prince, but she knew in her heart that things were far from perfect. Still, the day was approaching, and there was no turning back now. 2 days before the wedding, everything began to unravel. Adao and Ifunanya made the shocking discovery that Obiageli had gone missing from where she had been kept. The news hit them like a storm, sending them into a frenzy of panic and fear. How could this happen? Where had Obiageli gone? Had she somehow escaped, or was there something more sinister at play? The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous, as the reality of their actions began to set in. Could it be that Obiageli was still alive, plotting her revenge? Would she come back and ruin everything? As the clock ticked closer to the wedding, Adago and Ifunanya were left in the grip of uncertainty. What would they do now? Would their lies finally catch up with them? And, most terrifyingly, would Obiageli return to destroy everything they had worked for? The tension was unbearable, and the stakes higher than ever. The truth was coming closer, but could Adago and Ifunanya escape the consequences of their choices? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest episodes. Your support helps us grow and create more exciting content for you. Stay tuned for what's coming next.